there is a sound that few understand, but many have already heard. A high-pitched, short whistle that appears out of nowhere and disappears in seconds. You look around, but no one else notices. It doesn't come from the environment. It comes from within. And as simple as it may seem, this sound raises an unsettling question. Why do only some hear it? Science calls it tinnitus. But there are cases where it has no medical cause, no detectable condition, no diagnosis, only the sound. And that raises another possibility. What if this ringing isn't a flaw, but a sign? A kind of invisible communication that only a few can perceive. A vibrational code, an alert. Throughout the centuries, different cultures and traditions have spoken about spiritual sounds, frequencies, nonverbal messages, always associated with moments of transition, crisis, or awakening. This tone, often ignored, can be a mark of the chosen ones. People who don't live on autopilot, who perceive what most overlook, who hear what was never spoken. The ringing is not noise. It is an answer, a calling. And the more one tries to ignore it, the more it persists. It appears when you are alone, when silence is total, when something within you begins to awaken. That's when it comes. Not as a nuisance, but as a sign. My name is George. If you want to keep exploring this subject with depth and clarity, follow this channel. What happens when a sound appears out of nowhere, without warning, without an external source, without an apparent reason? A high-pitched whistle, a faint hum, a sound that no one else hears, only you. It lasts seconds, sometimes less, but long enough to make you stop, look around, and realize that somehow that wasn't ordinary. Most of the time, the explanation is simple. The ear is tired, the auditory system failed, it's stress, fatigue, or even age. It's true that happens. But when the sound occurs repeatedly, at specific moments, and without any clinical cause, you start to think differently. What if it's not only physical? What if it's sensory? Or more than that, what if it's spiritual? Many people don't talk about this for fear of seeming strange. But the truth is that this kind of phenomenon is more common than it seems. And those who experience it sense that there's something behind it. As if it were a code. A kind of signal that the physical world cannot explain. But that the body understands. For some people, this ringing appears when they are in silence. For others, it comes during a change of thought, a prayer, a moment of pain or reflection. The most important detail, it appears when the mind disconnects from autopilot. That's no coincidence. It's precisely in those moments that you leave the surface and begin to enter a more sensitive state. And in that state, certain things begin to manifest. One of them is sound. This sound is more than noise. It's a frequency, and frequency is communication. The chosen ones, throughout history, have always been described as people sensitive to things that others do not perceive. They pick up signals. They feel the environment. They have sharper intuition. Sometimes it comes with pain, other times with silence, and almost always with a calling. The ringing in the ears may be part of that calling. The question is, do you hear it by chance, or are you being warned? Because what seems subtle may be the most discreet way the universe has found to communicate with you. Without words, without symbols, only sound. Pure, direct, unquestionable. Most people ignore it. Some think they are going crazy. But there is a minority who understand. They don't hear with their ears. They hear with consciousness. The tone is only the beginning of a much greater process, the process of awakening. This awakening is not mystical, it is practical. It begins when you begin to observe, and instead of running from the sound, you start paying attention. When does it happen? What were you thinking? What decision were you about to make? All of that matters. The sound doesn't come by chance. It marks. It points. It signals. If you have heard this sound more than once, it's possible that you are in a moment of transition. And it's precisely at that moment that the sound appears, as if saying, stop and listen. Because sometimes, what you need to hear doesn't come in words, it comes in frequencies. This sound may be the beginning of a new chapter, not because it brings an answer, but because it forces you to ask the right question. The first one, why do only some hear? The concept of the chosen ones might seem heavy, but here, it does not refer to someone superior or more evolved. Being chosen is not a title, it is a state of perception. The chosen ones are those who have begun to perceive what has always been present, but that many ignore. It's not that they were born different, it's that at some point in life something broke them, and that breaking, instead of destroying them, opened a new channel of sensitivity. Pain, losses, crises, disappointments, all of these can be the trigger that pulls them out of automatic mode. And when that happens, the signs begin to appear. One of them is the sound. The ringing in the ear appears as if it were a marker, a reminder that the reality you see is not the only one. It arises when the mind is more receptive, when logic gives way to inner listening, and the chosen ones, having crossed this emotional or spiritual barrier, are more likely to hear. But why only a few? Because most people are still too busy, too distracted, or too closed off to listen to what has no form. The chosen ones are those who can no longer live in the world of distraction as before. They feel more, they see more, and as a result, they hear more as well. The ringing in the ear, in this case, is not an illness. It is a sign. It is activation. It is a reminder that something within you is ready for a new stage. The chosen ones are those who start asking different questions. They no longer want to just survive. They want to understand. They want to align themselves with something that makes sense. And this sound comes to show that they are not alone in this search. There are moments when the sound appears right after an important decision, or when you are about to take a path that doesn't align with who you are becoming. In those moments, the sound is almost like a warning. Re-evaluate other times. It arises in moments of alignment, during meditation, a sincere prayer, or a meaningful conversation. And then, the sound acts as a silent yes, a subtle confirmation that you're on the right path. The chosen ones begin to notice this pattern, and the more they notice, the more sensitive they become. Over time, the ringing ceases to be a mystery and becomes a tool, a kind of invisible compass that points the way when everything seems uncertain. There are no fixed rules, but there is one common point. The sound never appears in vain. And the chosen ones know this. They hear what others do not because they live attentively, because they feel that there is more, and because somehow they can no longer ignore what is calling from within. Most people treat the ringing in the ears as an insignificant noise, something that appears and disappears without value, without weight, without meaning. But for the chosen ones, this doesn't fit, because they notice that the sound shows up at very specific moments, and that changes everything. The ringing doesn't obey common logic. It arises when something needs to be heard, not with the ears, but with consciousness. It doesn't appear when we are too distracted. It emerges when there is internal space to listen. That's why many report that the sound comes during silence, or in the middle of an important thought, or in a moment of personal conflict. What seems like coincidence, in fact, has a pattern. The ringing acts as an alert, a reminder, a calling. It doesn't come with words, but it imposes itself with clarity. It interrupts the mental flow and makes you pay attention. It's as if it were saying, "Look again. Rethink this. Stop for a moment." The chosen ones understand that the ringing is a tool. It can arise to signal emotional danger, a deviation from the path, or even a moment of spiritual alignment. Sometimes it appears when you are about to make the wrong decision. Other times it arises as confirmation that you are doing the right thing. The ringing speaks, but in another language. It also appears after intense experiences, a loss, a sudden change, an identity crisis. In those moments, the mind tries to understand what is happening, but the spirit already knows. The sound emerges as a bridge between these two worlds, the rational and the spiritual. It doesn't bring the explanation, but it delivers the message that something is being moved within. Some see this sound as an annoyance, but the chosen ones learn to respect it, because they have already realized that it never comes for no reason. The more attentive they are, the more they can decipher the moment of the ringing, and this becomes a practice. They begin to associate the sound with their emotions, their thoughts, their decisions. That's why, over time, the ringing takes on a new meaning. It ceases to be noise and becomes an instrument of guidance. For those who are still spiritually asleep, everything seems like coincidence. For those who have begun to awaken, everything seems like a sign. The ringing is one of those signs. It's the kind of thing that cannot be proven, but can be experienced. And once you understand that, you never ignore it again. The ringing is a kind of tuning. It arises when you come into contact with something important, a memory, an idea, a feeling. And that requires attention, not to understand everything immediately, but not to miss the moment. The chosen ones live like this, attentive to the invisible. They know that the sound can be a warning, a confirmation, or a calling. And even without always understanding the reason, they know that listening is necessary, because the ringing is never by chance. One of the most common questions among those who begin to notice the spiritual ringing is, why does the sound sometimes come in the right ear and other times in the left? The answer may seem simple, but it carries an ancient wisdom that many ignore. For those who are attentive, the side of the ringing also communicates. Various spiritual traditions around the world affirm that the body responds to different flows of energy. The right side is connected to the active, rational, and spiritual field. The left to the intuitive, emotional, and internal field. This division is symbolic, but it greatly helps in interpreting certain signs. The ringing in the ears is one of them. When the sound appears in the right ear, it is usually related to an external, spiritual, or confirming message. It's as if it were a yes coming from above, a response to a prayer, a validation of a choice, or even the approach of spiritual guides. It's not superstition, it's perception. And the chosen ones develop this perception over time. The sound in the left ear, however, tends to carry different energy. It points inward. It's connected to intuition, self-awareness, and internal warning. It's as if it were saying, pay attention to yourself. It can appear when there is emotional conflict, energetic imbalance, or even an attempt from one's own spirit to communicate with the mind. It's not a rigid rule, but it is a recurring pattern. And those who listen carefully notice it. The side of the ringing is part of the message. It can indicate whether the communication is external spiritual or internal emotional. Knowing this helps the chosen ones not to ignore what needs to be understood. For example, if the ringing in the left ear always arises when you're about to do something that goes against your principles, it's a sign that something within you is trying to prevent it. It's your own field of consciousness attempting to balance the decision. The sound in the right ear, on the other hand, may come when you finish a prayer or have an idea aligned with your mission. It's a green light. The chosen ones begin to record these moments. They take notes, they observe, they connect the dots, and thus they develop real sensitivity. They don't get stuck in theories. They live the ringing as a practical language, as a tool for listening and guidance. Over time, this understanding becomes a habit. When hearing the sound, the chosen one already recognizes the side, the moment, and the feeling. There's no need to chase external answers. They've learned to listen with the body and with the soul. This kind of perception cannot be taught in a course. It develops along the journey. And the more attentive you are, the more you'll understand what each ringing is trying to say. The sound doesn't need to bring words. It speaks for itself. And each side is a part of that conversation. The ear is the door. The ringing is the key. The meaning, that's for you to find. The ringing in the ears, for many of the chosen ones, is not just a sign of warning or confirmation. At certain moments, it is more than that. It marks the beginning of something new, an activation, a kind of internal reconfiguration. And this is not always visible at the moment it happens. In spiritual contexts, there is a term called energetic download. It refers to a transmission of spiritual information directly into a person's field of consciousness. It's not something that can be understood with immediate logic. It's something that arrives, settles in, and only later reveals itself. The ringing may be the sign that this spiritual file is being sent. This download doesn't come in the form of text, video, or explanation. It comes as a sensation, perception, presence. It's as if a seed were being planted within you. And over time, that seed begins to generate ideas, clarity, decisions, visions. You don't know exactly where it came from, but you know that something has changed. Many report that after hearing the ringing, they began to see life differently. Ideas arose, connections were made, thinking became sharper, intuition became more sensitive. That is a sign that something has been activated, even if subtly. This process, however, can cause discomfort at first. During the reception of this energetic content, it's common to feel pressure in the ears, mental confusion, emotional agitation. This happens because the body is trying to adjust to the new frequency. It's realigning, and that's not always comfortable. It's like a spiritual update, and the chosen ones, being in tune with this level of sensitivity, notice it. They feel the difference. They understand that the sound didn't come by chance, and even without understanding everything at the time, they respect the process. When the ringing arises in this context, the best thing to do is to stop, be silent, breathe. It's not the time to force understanding. It's the time to make space. The content will come later, the clarity too. First, the body receives. Then, the mind understands. The sound, in this case, is a sign that something is being delivered. And the chosen one, upon hearing it, takes their position as one who receives, with attention, with humility, with presence. The ringing as a key to reconnection. There comes a moment when the ringing in the ears stops being an isolated event and begins to repeat itself. It doesn't appear just once in a while. It starts to manifest frequently. And that usually indicates that something is being rebuilt from within. The sound becomes a marker of reconnection. The chosen ones go through this stage when they are undergoing some important transformation. Sometimes they can't explain what is changing, but they feel that they are no longer the same. What once made sense no longer does. What used to be routine now feels uncomfortable. And in the midst of this inner change, the sound appears. The ringing at that point is not a warning. It is a confirmation that you are returning to yourself. To reconnect does not mean to go back to what you once were. It means to return to what is essential, to what was forgotten, to what was left behind because of haste, pain, or distractions. The sound acts as a reminder. It calls you back. It points the way back to the center. The chosen ones understand this over time. At first, the sound seems random, but as they observe it, they notice that it always appears when they are approaching something true. An idea, a choice, a decision, a realization. The ringing arises as a subtle mark of alignment. And the more you accept this function of the ringing, the more it becomes an ally. It manifests when you need to slow down, when you are drifting away from what is real, when you get lost in distractions or begin to doubt yourself. It doesn't shout. It simply whispers, "Come back." It's like an invisible thread pulling you back home. The chosen ones value this sign because they know it's not ordinary. They know it's a simple yet powerful spiritual tool. The ringing, when understood this way, becomes part of the journey. And every time it appears, the heart recognizes, "I'm returning to what matters." For those who are attentive, the ringing in the ears stops being just a strange occurrence. It becomes a turning point, a watershed moment, a discreet but direct sign that the journey has begun. And from that moment on, everything begins to change. Not around you, but within. The ringing doesn't deliver ready-made answers. It doesn't explain. It doesn't translate. It simply signals. And those who are ready understand. The sound is like an invisible line marking. From this point on, you will see the world differently. For the chosen ones, this is the beginning of the path. There is no manual. There is no fixed script. But there is an inner movement that starts to intensify. Sensitivity increases. Perception sharpens. You begin to question what you once accepted. And what once seemed normal now causes discomfort. That is the change the ringing announces. The life of the chosen one no longer runs on autopilot. Small details gain weight. Words, environments, decisions. Everything starts to be perceived more deeply. And often this brings distance. Not out of pride, but out of necessity. The world remains the same, but those who awaken can no longer live the same way. The sound doesn't appear to impress. It appears to activate, to mark the beginning of a cycle of reconnection. Those who listen consciously begin to live in a more aligned way. Even without understanding everything, they begin to trust their own intuition more, to observe the signs, to accept the process. It's common that after hearing the ringing repeatedly, the person feels the urge to seek more, to read, to study, to be silent, to pray, to understand what is happening. This is natural. The ringing is the push, but the path must be walked. And that is precisely what differentiates the chosen one. They don't ignore the call. What once seemed like just a sound without explanation ends up revealing a much greater meaning. The ringing in the ears is not merely a physical or random phenomenon. For those who are attentive, it works like a code, a marker, a subtle warning that something inside of you is in motion, something that goes beyond ordinary logic. Most people ignore it. Others get frightened. Some try to silence the sound at all costs. But there is a smaller, more attentive group that chooses to listen. Not with fear, nor with despair, but with awareness. These are the chosen ones. They were not chosen because of merit, status, or superiority. They were chosen because they decided to perceive. The ringing does not demand blind faith. It demands observation. It invites presence. It calls the individual to step away from the noise of the world and into the silence necessary to hear what truly matters. Modern life trains us to ignore everything that isn't urgent. But the deepest signals do not shout, they whisper. And those who are not awake cannot hear them. The ringing is one of those whispers. It carries messages that do not come in words, but in frequency, in sensation, in timing. It doesn't bring direct answers, but it points toward the place where the answers can be found, within yourself. For the chosen ones, this journey is not about standing out. It's about aligning. It's about leaving superficiality and returning to essence. The sound doesn't come to distract. It comes to remind that there is another path, another rhythm, another kind of listening, a way of perceiving life that doesn't happen through the eyes, but through consciousness. Throughout this content, it has become clear that the ringing appears at strategic moments. It arises in silences, in crises, in decisions, in prayers, in alignments. It appears to draw attention, to redirect, to validate, to warn. Each time it manifests, it fulfills a function, and each function has a purpose. If you've come this far and recognize this sound in your own experience, don't ignore it. Pay attention, observe the patterns, start noting when it occurs, what you're living, thinking, feeling. Over time, the ringing will stop seeming strange and will begin to make sense. And when that happens, you'll realize that it isn't just a symptom, it's a sign. The journey of the chosen ones does not begin with a vision, a light, or a spectacular revelation. It begins with something subtle, small, almost imperceptible, and for that very reason, so important. The ringing in the ears may be exactly that, the beginning of everything. Now that you know, the next step is yours.